6 points between first and second, and 6 points between second and ninth after the first series of League of Ireland fixtures was completed in the Premier Division. I'm Aidan O'Hara. I'm joined at Independent.ie by soccer correspondent Daniel McDonnell, who is in Talca Park to see Shelbourne beat Sligo in the end with an own goal that will be probably hard to beat for comedy value this season.
Yeah, it's a shocker from Sligo Rovers. I want your centre half's perspective here on this one. At first I was like, listen, it's a shocking goal. That's your instinctive response. Then you're thinking, could the keeper have done more? But I'm watching it back now and I'm thinking, John Matt and what he's trying is, it depends on the communication, I guess. But it's I
think it happened so fast. I think it happened so fast that probably from the centre back's position, the goalkeeper's probably thinking he's not going to get to that, so I'm not going to call it. And the defender's thinking, I'm going to get my head to this and head it back to the keeper. He was probably in the middle of his goal, and there just isn't time to communicate, and that just happens. The slip, it's effectively a diving header from probably about 30 yards out. You couldn't do it if you tried. You really couldn't. So it just looked like one of those, it's one of those things that happens in games sometimes, and there's not an awful lot really. Goals are always preventable, but sometimes things just happen so quick. There's not even the opportunity. From the time, I'm not sure who the Shelbourne player was who played the ball, but from the time it leaves his foot to the time it deflects in, it's probably a second, or if even that, or half a second. So to actually communicate the fact from the goalkeeper's perspective that I have that ball, you don't have time. You wouldn't have had time to do it. So it's just one of those unfortunate events.
Yeah. The
game itself, then, did Shells deserve it?
It's a mad goal, really. I did they deserve it? I mean, at half time, Sligo Rovers were 1-0 up, deservedly 1-0 up. And to go back to your initial point at the start of this, Sligo Rovers were third at the start of the day, and actually at half time they were joint second, effectively. And at the end of the night they're sixth, and Shells are ahead of them. Even though Shells could have been sort of level with Cork and sort of in this relegation playoff mode, it's crazy. I think Sligo Rovers will be sick going home. That was John Russell's tone afterwards. He just couldn't believe it, although he was just very critical of the mistakes they've made defensively, and that's why they haven't kept a clean sheet this season. They were good in the first half, and they looked like, to me, actually a side with some very good players. I hadn't seen them in the flesh, I'd just seen them on LOI TV. They were good. With Damien Duffman, the trebles change at half time. Clearly wasn't happy. They'd been very poor at Belfield on Friday. At half time, we're thinking, they'd started the game very well, but then they were poor up till half time. Second half, they were good, but it was that sort of 2 goals in 10 minutes, and all of a sudden they had something to defend.
Yeah.
Very hard. The congested nature of the table means there's a rush to reach a conclusion on where teams are at. But I think, to me, it's very much a case of, it shows how the league in a way is in a little bit of a state of flux. And we'll talk about teams who were in crisis 2 weeks ago who are flying now, and the other way around. And it was hard not to be struck by things that were going on elsewhere as much as things that were going on in Talca. But it was a good game. I previously said Shells weren't a great watch, and I got a bit of a response from 1 or 2 people, but I have to admit that was a much better game than I was expecting in terms of goal activity.
Yeah, and just there is a very congested nature of the table, but one team were outside that congestion. Bowls 6 points clear. A phenomenal response to Friday night's game against Rovers, and they didn't particularly lay a glove on Rovers. But to go to Derry, we'll come to Derry in a minute, but from Bohemians' perspective, they couldn't have dreamed of that start to the season after the first series of games.
Yeah, that's the thing. The bigger picture for Bows is the number of points they have relative to their ambitions, which I think realistically, just getting back to Europe would be an incredible result for them this year. I think privately they would all know that. Look, they have a good gap at the top of the table, and as much as Friday was a reality check, you could say, and you lose games, you just get back on the horse as quickly as possible. I did get to see probably the last 15-20 of this just because it was half time in the game I was at, and Derry did lay a little bit of a siege eventually, but I got the impression that wasn't reflective of the entire game. And Bows, like Talbot, 1 or 2 big saves, and it's huge just for momentum. Things could go flat very quickly if you had back-to-back and your confidence is affected, and there's this great positivity around Bows, which I'm guessing on Saturday morning it was tough, but they'll wake up tomorrow with that feeling, and coming to play St. Pat's on Friday, they'll be feeling very happy with life again.
Yeah, I mean, with the exception of Rovers, where they were well beaten. They've either like at the Shells game, there was nothing in that game. That was the other game that they lost. They've beaten every other team, I think, if I'm not mistaken in saying that. Like, I mean, that brings huge confidence, I'm sure, into the rest of the season. But for Derry, I mean, Derry, I think, have 5 points from 5 home games. I know we've talked about their pitch and we've talked about different things about injuries and such like, but for what was expected of them versus what they've delivered, it's been probably a disappointing series, if you like, as the first 9 games.
It has, yeah, like 15 points from 9, but like the fact that they go into the break a point ahead of Shamrock Rovers, having won in Tala. Like if you say to them at the start of the season, you're going to win in Tala, where are you going to be after 9 games? To be one ahead. Now, like the flip side is you reboot, and as you know, footballers, they're great. Like you look ahead. I mean, in the next series, Rovers have to come to Derry, but like as we mentioned, like it's just a venue that I think teams who go there and are organised and can defend well can frustrate them. And what I saw, I mean, they took off McElhenney and Patching. The last, what would concern me for Derry, like, yeah, the last 10, 15, they were laying siege a bit, but I've seen that game a bit last year. There was games where they dropped points last year that finished like that in the Brandywell too. And I'm seeing it again. And it just feels like at the moment, they've lost Alan Reynolds, the number 2. I mean, these staff always gets analysed to death when you have bad results. I mean, we see this with Ireland, I suppose. But still, like, he's a big sounding board as well, and he's gone. So, yeah, they're definitely like they go to Dundalk on Sunday now, refixed because of the Biden visit, and like that's actually a pretty big game in Oriel Park this Sunday because both teams got into that desperately in need of a result.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's home defeats for Derry against Drogheda and Bohemians. You've got some odds against that. I mean, speaking of Dundalk, I think that's 3 defeats in a row now. The game against Cork, just by all accounts, it seemed to be quite scrappy. You 1 goal, won it obviously, but they seem to be, I don't know, struggling a little bit. It's obviously difficult to jump to conclusions, obviously, but 3 defeats in a row, including a game down in Cork that would have been one they'd kind of target. It's a difficult moment, as some people might put it.
Yeah, definitely. And like us, we're not going to flip too much into preview mode of Sunday because we can do that in due course. But yeah, I did get to see some of this. The great thing about staggered fixtures, I did get to see some of this game, and again, they're chasing the game in the second half, 1 down, but they've no Pat Hooban. He's named on the bench, but clearly wasn't fit. And yeah, just nice at times, Dundalk. Some okay passages of play, but not really penetrating. And I mean, it's a big result for Cork. I mean, like home form is that's where they've got their points, and they've kept a clean sheet when they've conceded a lot of goals, and they sort of got ahead, and there was almost a sense of the second half anyway. It was a case of, okay, are you good enough to break us down? And Dundalk weren't.
They weren't, and they weren't. We talked about before. I think you just mentioned earlier on teams with momentum. Teams seem to be struggling. Pats now, I think, have 3 wins in a row. Dundalk 3 defeats in a row. But Pats 3 wins in a row. 3-1 win in Drogheda. Drogheda are coming off a victory in Derry. That's a good solid result for Pats in terms of kind of really knowing where they are in terms of the chasing pack, if you like.
It's huge. When you consider Pats, the last time they went to Louth, they lost 5-0 to Dundalk. And now they go to Drogheda and they find themselves now 3 points ahead of Dundalk at the end of it. So it's funny, like, I mean, there's not, Shamrock Rovers beat UCD 3-0. It's not a huge amount to say. But like what's relevant is that Shamrock Rovers and Pats are almost moving in concert together, that they're now suddenly joint third, having previously been like 8th and 9th, and that was like a great source of amusement. They've both now gone and won 3 games in a row, and they're now suddenly like sort of within 7 points of top spot and 1 point off second. So yeah, I think Drogheda are a good side. I think sometimes, and I know it's without having been at the game, you can resort to cliche too much when you're talking about the part-time teams, but it is sometimes the case that the Friday Monday turnaround is harder for them. They've lost both their Monday games so far after big efforts on the Friday. And I mean, I suppose this is the thing where, the depth of your squad. I mean, Pats have picked up a couple of injuries tonight. I think that'd be the concern. Jake Mulroney gone off, Joe Redmond gone off. And that's not great news for Bows on Friday. But in the short term, I think that's a big win for them, yeah.
Yeah, and as you said, Rovers 3, UCD 0. I think when Pats played Rovers I think it was 8th against 9th, if I'm not mistaken. It was either 7th against 8th or 8th against 9th.
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
When they drew 2-2, and as you said, they've gone up Rovers again, 3 wins in a row, I think it is now, and 3-0 against UCD. Sort of the perfect, probably the perfect game to have after a big win against Bows, just to relatively cool and calm and just do the job and move on.
Yeah, there's not much you can say. I think. I mean, I suppose they Graham Burke in good form, Jack Byrne, like they rotated some players in and out. Yeah, like Graham Burke's confidence. I mean, could he be top scorer this year if he has an uninterrupted year? Like, it's possible he's up to 5. He's one behind Max Mata, but yeah, it's a routine win for Rovers, and they've got Shells on Friday, who can be a tricky opponent, as they know. But at least they're feeling very good about life, probably because of those Derry results as much as their own ones.
Yeah, Dan, it's great. Thanks very much for joining us, and we'll speak to you again soon.
No worries.